Families campaigning to see more of their relatives in care homes say changes to government guidance on visiting don't go far enough. John's campaign, a group representing families of people with dementia, say they plan to go ahead with legal action claiming they breach human rights. In lower risk areas, residents can usually have one visitor, but in higher risk areas, the advice is that visits should only happen in exceptional circumstances. The government says its priority is keeping residents safe. Alison Holt has been speaking to those affected.
The handful of times I've been able to go, Mum has got really upset and said, "Why don't you come in? You're getting wet and I can't go on like this. Nobody wants me. And why don't I just drop dead?" It's horrible, horrible.
This is the heartache behind the planned legal action.
She just couldn't understand why we couldn't go in. She just said, "Why have you dumped me here? They don't look after me." She was just desperate.
Families divided by months of tight restrictions on care home visits.
It's my belief that she died thinking that nobody loved her anymore.
Carol Tennant's mum, Jean, moved to a care home just before lockdown. They went from spending a lot of time together to a few visits through a window or in the garden. The 89-year-old deteriorated rapidly and died in September.
I've got no problem with the home. They did a really, really good job. They kept COVID out. But at what cost? And I don't mean the home, I mean across the country. At what cost?
After so many COVID-related deaths in care homes, government guidance and local restrictions are there to protect residents. But Sheila Brown was moved to a nursing home knowing she was nearing the end of her life.
When somebody's on an end-of-life care pathway, the things that matter to them are family, quality of life, not quantity of life.
For months, families have been saying rather than only being able to see their relatives through windows or in gardens, they should be given key worker status with access to testing and PPE. Margaret Johnson has dementia, and key worker status would allow her daughter to spend much more precious time with her.
The people trying to get into care homes to see their loved ones are going to be careful. They're not the kind of people who are going to go to a rave, are going to have a house party with 100 people in. They're people who care about their families.
The government says it will pilot key worker status to try to give families more time with relatives, but it's not clear when that will happen. Alison Holt, BBC News.
The UK is set to become the first country in the world to deliberately infect volunteers with coronavirus to speed up the race to get a vaccine. Healthy volunteers under the age of 30 will be paid to take part in the human challenge trials, and they'll be monitored for side effects for up to a year. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh reports.
Estefania wants to be deliberately infected with coronavirus, all in the name of science. She's part of One Day Sooner, a group which is campaigning for so-called challenge trials.
For a young, healthy person, the probabilities of me dying or anything is very, very low. And so when I think about what society gains by getting a vaccine sooner, I'm not that worried about the risks.
Thousands of people like Edward are part of COVID vaccine trials, but it could be months before we know whether the jab protects them against coronavirus. In a challenge trial, volunteers are immunised and then infected with the virus, so it's clear straight away if the vaccine works. Scientists need to know how much coronavirus is required to ensure that the volunteers get infected. So the first people on the trials won't get a vaccine, they'll simply get a predetermined dose of coronavirus. Now, amazingly, there are thousands of people ready to sign up for this sort of thing.
So up to 2 weeks they were spent in here, so they'll be closely monitored.
Those taking part will need to be aged between 18 and 30. And are likely to receive around £4,000. But what about the potential dangers of getting COVID-19?
So we're only going to be inoculating people who have the very lowest potential risk for a severe outcome. The trial has been designed that they will have very minimal disease, potentially not even any symptoms.
Gary is a challenge trial veteran. He's had malaria as part of one study. And this is him drinking a solution laced with typhoid bacteria. The experimental typhoid vaccine he was trialling worked and is now saving lives.
Really the confirmation that you really were part of something which really made a huge difference to lives around the world. You know, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people that can now benefit from a typhoid vaccine. But yeah, that was pretty fantastic.
The world owes a debt of gratitude to all medical volunteers, but especially those ready to get a disease. Challenge studies don't replace conventional trials, but they might just speed up the process of finding out which coronavirus vaccines work best. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.